Yes.
Are you feeling confused?
Yes.
There was a lot of discussion on cross-examination about things you said on the 23rd in 2021, things that you said on the 26th in 2021, things you said in 2023, things you said this morning. Do you remember all those questions about all of that?
No.
Is it your job to read transcripts?
No.
Have you been provided transcripts from interviews and testimony?
No.
Have you spent hours and hours combing through what you've said before and masterminding what you're going to do today?
No.
Are you here today trying to tell the truth?
Yes.
The Bridget Schlicht today who's been clean for 2 years?
Yes.
There were questions on cross-examination where you agreed that Black was willing to hurt 3 people at the quarry. Do you remember being asked about that?
Yes.
Did you agree to that because Black shot 3 people at the quarry?
No.
Did you agree to that because he was a part of it?
Yes.
Because he was working with somebody else to do that?
Yes.
Because he was with Cush doing that?
Yes.
Because they were a team doing that together?
Yes.
You were asked questions about a conversation you had at one point with Mr. Thurston. Do you remember those?
Yes.
And you were questioned on cross-examination about telling Mr. Thurston, I don't think he'd kill me, meaning Cush. Do you remember that?
A little bit, yes.
Why'd you tell Mr. Thurston that?
I don't remember why we were talking about it.
You don't remember why you were talking about it, but let me ask you this. At that time, when you were speaking with Mr. Thurston, did you think Cush would kill you?
No.
Why is that?
Because he didn't kill me when he had the chance.
Cush was the nicer one, wasn't he?
Yes.
Cush let you live.
Yes.
Black was the meaner one, wasn't he?
Yes.
Do you think Black would have let you live?
No.
There were some questions on cross-examination about when you, afterwards, after the quarry, after sleeping, after the holiday, and after all of that, when you were at Tim Marks's house and you gave him or left meth at his house.
Correct.
Did you give him or did you leave?
I left it there.
Okay. After Tim Marks's house, you went to the police.
Correct.
Would you ever take meth to the police department?
No.
There were a lot of questions about you witnessing Black kidnap Nemo. Is that something you actually saw with your eyes?
I wouldn't consider it kidnapping him, no.
What would you consider it?
Just that they all got out of the vehicle and he got into the other vehicle.
Okay. There at the end of cross-examination, you were asked about Black's, the process by which he went through the criminal justice system and ultimately entered guilty pleas and was sentenced and is in prison now. Do you remember those questions?
Yes.
Black entered a guilty plea to first-degree intentional homicide as a party to a crime.
Overruled. She's trying to get to the subject. Go ahead.
Black entered a plea to first-degree intentional homicide as a party to a crime. Are you aware of that?
Yes.
On cross-examination, you were asked a lot of questions about violent things that you saw Black do at the quarry, right?
Yes.
You were asked questions about witnessing a pistol whipping
Yes.
and pointing a gun at you, correct? You attributed a lot of violence to Black. Are you afraid, or were you afraid, to tell the truth to the police about witnessing that violence?
No.
Why is that?
I just wasn't afraid to say that. Can you rephrase your question, though?
Are you afraid of telling the truth?
No, no.
Are you afraid of describing violent things Black did to us?
No.
Ms. Schlicht, did you put the gun in Cush's hand to cover for Black?
No.
Are you here in court lying for Cam Ratnasak?
No.
Ms. Schlicht, who shot Nemo Yang, Peng Moore, and Trevor Maloney?
Nya Thao.
Thank you. Nothing further, Judge.
Cross?
You just were asked questions. You told the prosecutor that you were confused during my earlier questions. Is that what you said?
Yes.
Fair to say when we spoke for 77 minutes in front of the jury, you didn't tell them you were confused?
I told you I was confused on some of these questions.
And then I stopped, gave you a chance, and you answered my questions, right?
Correct.
Gave you opportunities, correct?
Correct.
So any confusion that you had, we cleared up during my questions, correct?
Correct.
A couple of things I want to cover. One is, you were asked some questions about Black's kidnapping of Nemo. I want to ask you questions about that, okay? When asked to describe it, you said Nemo got in Black's car. Is that right?
Correct.
But what you left out in that most recent description is Nemo got in Black's car because Black pointed a gun at him and told him, "Get in my car," right?
Correct.
That's why you agreed it was kidnapping, right?
Correct.
Okay. You were also asked questions about Black's guilty plea to 3 counts of first-degree intentional homicide, right?
Objection misstates the record.
What was the objection? I didn't.
Objection, it misstates the record.
That's correct.
You were asked questions about Black's guilty pleas, correct?
Correct.
You know he pled guilty, correct?
Correct.
You know that he pled guilty to, I'm going to ask a second question after this, 3 counts of first-degree intentional homicide as a party to the crime, correct?
Objection, it misstates the record.
It doesn't.
I don't think it does. Overruled. I think he asked, go ahead. If you can answer the question.
I'll ask it again. You agree, you acknowledge that Cam Ratnasak, as you call him, Black, entered a guilty plea to 3 counts of first-degree intentional homicide as a party to the crime. Agreed?
Correct.
You Do you have knowledge as to how somebody can be found guilty of a crime as a party to the crime?
No,
Would it surprise you to learn that somebody can be guilty of a crime as a party to the crime by directly doing it and being the shooter?
can you rephrase this again?
Sure.
I'm trying to follow you.
That's fine. It's a legal concept, and I don't want to confuse you. Would it surprise you to learn that a person can be guilty of first-degree intentional homicide as a party to the crime and be the shooter who directly committed the crime?
It's a very long question. Can you just say the first half of it, please?
Maybe I don't want to confuse you. Let me start in a different space, okay? You don't know why Cam Ratnasek pled guilty, correct?
Correct.
You don't know if his guilty plea, what that signifies as to his admissions about his involvement, correct?
Correct.
You don't know. You just know he pled guilty, correct?
Right.
And you know, because you knew about what his previous statements were before he entered the guilty plea. Let me ask, do you know what his story was before he entered the guilty plea?
No,
You've never heard what his story was that he told the police?
no.
Okay. You were asked some questions about, your answers for telling the truth were the Bridget Schlitt that we see here today, who's been clean and sober for 2 years, right?
Right.
And you agree, I think we agreed before, that that person who we see before us today, that clean and sober human being who's made great strides to do that, that's a different person than the person in July of 2021, correct?
Yes.
That person in July of 2021 who had the same name as you, that person was willing to lie to protect themselves. Agreed?
Agree.
And what we know is this person, today, Bridget Schlitt, 2024, you want to do everything you can to distance yourself from that old Bridget.
Yes.
And anything that puts you at risk being sucked back into that world, that Bridget, you'd do anything in your life to avoid that, right?
Yes.
That's all.
Any redirect?
Are you lying to protect yourself?
No.
Judge, are we getting
And
Wait, just a second.
my approach?
Watch leading questions. Go ahead and ask a question.
This is the third round is my objection.
Oh, overruled. I allow there to be rounds until we're done. Go ahead.
the only other thing, Judge, is I would ask that you take judicial notice of the fact that Mr. Ratanasak entered a plea of guilty to 1 count, not 3.
Oh, and if I misspoke that, absolutely, let's correct the record. I apologize and take judicial notice.
Yeah. So you both stipulated that was 1 count of first-degree intentional homicide as a party to a crime.
Correct.
Is that correct?
To be honest, whatever the record shows, I'm not,
Okay,
that's
So-
35 years, I know.
all right. Find judicial notice for that. Go ahead.
Thank you, that's it. Nothing further, Judge.
Okay. All right, with that, I'm striking your question, so there's no redirect here, and so I'll have you step down then. Thank you. Okay, we want to call next witness.
At this time, the state calls Seth Barna.
step over here, so. Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you give in this matter shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? You can have a seat over here.
Good afternoon.
Hello.
Can you please state your name and spell it for the record?
Seth David Barna, Seth B as in boy, ARNA.
And Mr. Barnott, are you a resident of La Crosse County?
Yes,
How long have you lived in La Crosse County?
about 25 years.
Where are you employed?
Anderson Health Systems, now Amplify.
And how long have you been an employee of it?
Just over 25 years.
Mr. Barnett, I'm going to ask you to think it back to April 13th of 2023. Can you tell us what you had going on that day?
We had just returned from a trip to Florida, and it was a beautiful morning. It was warmer here than it was actually in Florida, so we decided to go for a walk that morning since we were off of work. And we started taking a walk down the road like we normally would, and found a bag along the road that was a reusable bag, so we started picking up trash.
What road were you on, Mr. Barna?
Our County Road M.
And you said you were picking up trash.
Picking up trash, aluminum cans, different things that we'd find along the road like we would every spring.
This is something you typically did.
Yes,
Have you ever picked up trash along the particular part of the road you were on that day?
we have in the past.
How do you and your wife do that?
We walk along the road. Usually one of us takes one side and one takes the other and grab stuff, put it in a bag.
Were you walking towards the northerly direction on M?
So we're going up the hills, yes.
Okay. And did you find anything that day that was different than when you had done that activity previously?
I was across the road from my wife, and she asked me to come over to where she was in her location, and then she pointed out to me that she had found what appeared to be a firearm.
Did you or your wife have more experience with firearms?
I do.
What is your experience with firearms?
Grown up around them, and I have been a certified Wisconsin hunter safety instructor for probably 15 years, and I also have my concealed carry permit.
So what did you do after your wife alerted you to that?
I took a couple pictures. I went closer to the firearm and used the back of my finger to lift up on the trigger guard to inspect it to see if it was indeed an actual firearm and not just some type of airsoft gun or something that wouldn't qualify as the technical definition of a firearm.
And for someone with little to no knowledge of guns, how could you make that determination?
Well, as I turned it over, I saw that the make, model, and caliber were stamped as they should be on the slide of the firearm. And as I identified that, I tipped it back down and put a little bit of grass over it, and then we walked away.
Do you remember what that make, model, caliber was?
I can tell you it was a Glock 40 caliber, Smith & Wesson.
And I believe it was your testimony that you put some grass over it.
Yep. Put some grass over it, just didn't know if anybody else would see it shining in the sun, so just covered it up so nobody else found it.
What did you do next?
We continued to pick up trash on the way back down, and then when we got to our house, I actually texted a friend of mine who is a police officer in the city department, and he recommended that I call the Sheriff's Department non-emergent line, which I did, and reported the fact that I had found a firearm.
Then what happened?
We waited for a while. It took about probably an hour or so for the officer to, or the deputy to come out. Actually went by our house the first time, and I was outside raking grass as it was dry enough to do so, and then he came back in our direction and pulled into the driveway.
Did you take him to where the firearm was located, or where you had previously located it?
I did. He pulled in the driveway. We exchanged confirmation that he was in the right place and that I had indeed found the firearm. And like I said, I was raking grass at the end of the driveway on the lawn. So I was standing there basically watching him, pull in.
How did the two of you get back to the location?
I asked how I could go there, and he didn't recommend, he recommended I asked if I could ride in his car instead of having to drive up there myself. And he said that I could, however, I had to be patted down and searched in order to be in the back of the squad car.
So that happened in your front yard?
In my front yard, yep.
Did any neighbors drive by?
No, my wife was sitting on the front porch.
So then did you take the deputy to the location?
We did, drove past it and parked.
Okay. And the two of you then got out of the car?
Yes.
And what happened next?
I identified the area where we had found the firearm, and then took a little bit, just to get back to the same spot. I had, like I said, had taken a picture just so I could identify the surroundings, and then we did find it, and he had uncovered took the grass and stuff off of it.
Barna, I'm going to hand you what has been pre-marked as Exhibit 14. The laser pointer too, we'll get to that in a second. Do you recognize what you're looking at?
Yes.
Is this a photograph?
Yes, I recognize it as photograph County M.
Is it a photograph you took?
I don't believe it is.
Okay. But the...
It is not, actually, because I did not take any with squad car present.
Okay. But it is a view that you recognize?
Yep.
And does it show the location of the firearm in it?
It does.
Is what you're seeing in the photo a true and accurate representation of what you saw on that day when you found the firearm?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'd ask for the admission of Exhibit 14 and a request that it be published.
Get received, can be published.
And Mr. Barna, that's now up on the screen. Can you please use the laser pointer and indicate where the firearm is located in that photo? Behind you, I'm sorry.
Oh.
That's confusing. Right there in the bottom third of the picture?
Yes.
And is that the deputy's patrol car? Is that correct?
Yes.
And the car that, or the direction that the deputy's patrol car was traveling in, is that the same direction that you approached the gun from earlier that day?
Yes.
And that is on the passenger side of the deputy's vehicle, correct?
Correct.
Mr. Barna, did you make any other observations about the gun besides the make, model, caliber?
That the slide and action were very rusty, and that there was a clip actually in the firearm indicating that there was a clip in there and that the slide was closed.
Okay. Someone with experience with firearms, what does that indicate to you?
I would assume at that point, without having a cleared action, that it was a loaded firearm.
Okay. And why would you assume that?
Most often the clip, unless it's inserted after the gun is fired, the clip is still going to have ammo in it, and the action being closed means that it advanced a round into the chamber.
Okay. And you said it was rusty?
Yes.
Okay. Are any of the firearms you own rusty?
No.
Thank you, sir. I have nothing further.
Cross?
Hello. When you saw the gun, apologize, I pointed at you. When you saw the gun, you minimized your physical touching of the gun, is that right?
I attempted to lift the gun with the back of my finger as not to disturb it, yes.
Yeah. You did it in a way to minimize how much physical contact you had with that gun, correct?
Yes.
You wanted to make sure, again, that you were that it was a real gun, right?
I wanted to confirm that before I called the the sheriff's department, as I was thinking I was going to do, and just for general safety, I wasn't going to put my finger anywhere near that.
Absolutely. And you also wanted to minimize your touching because if it was a real gun, for all you know, it could be evidence of something, correct?
I just know it was a gun laying there.
Okay. And I'm guessing you minimized the touching of it because you're concerned about potentially leaving fingerprint evidence?
That, and I didn't want to get my finger near the trigger.
Sure. Or you're concerned about disturbing fingerprint evidence?
Well, I just did not want to put any more fingerprints on it than are already there.
Sure. And you were probably also concerned, you've heard of DNA evidence, correct?
Yep.
You were concerned about either leaving your own DNA evidence or disturbing whatever DNA evidence was there, correct?
I just didn't want to disturb it any more than I had to.
Yep. And so that's why you minimized the touching of it, correct? All right. Just two more questions. You weren't at the Quarry on M on July 23rd, 2021 at 2 a.m.?
No, sir.
And you agree you have no knowledge of who was the shooter who shot the 3 young men at the Quarry on that day?
No, sir.
You agree?
I agree.
That's all.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. You may step down. All right, call your next witness.
State will call Cody Ratkovich.
Oh, thank you.
Do you solemnly swear the testimony given in this matter shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Can you please state and spell your name for me?
It's Cody Ratkovich, first of Cody, C-O-D-Y, last of Ratkovich, R-A-T-K-O-V-I-C-H,
And where do you work?
for the Crosse County Sheriff's Office,
What is your position there?
Sheriff's Deputy.
And how long have you been a sheriff's deputy with the La Crosse County Sheriff's Department?
June of 2019.
What are your typical job duties?
Just normal traffic control, traffic enforcement, just responding to any call that basically comes out in my area.
Would it be like lump that into road patrol.
Yep,
And were you on duty April 13th of 2023?
I was.
Were you dispatched to a residence on County Road M that day in the township of Farmington?
I was.
And why were you dispatched there?
I was dispatched there for a found property report for a found gun on the side of the road.
And who did you talk to when you got to that location?
I talked to the complainant. His name was Seth Barna.
Did Mr. Barna take you to the location of the found property, the firearm?
He did.
How did you get there?
I went to his residence, which is just down the road from there, and then I had him in the back of my patrol vehicle and just a short distance away.
Are there any procedures or precautions you have to take before you let somebody ride in your patrol vehicle?
Yeah, anytime we give anybody, we transport anybody, we search them just to make sure.
And Deputy, where was the firearm located?
So from his residence, it was under a mile, just north on County Road M and be on the south side of the road.
If I can have Exhibit 2 published, please. Deputy Ratkovich, there should be a laser pointer up there in front of you. From your work as a patrol deputy, are you familiar with the portion of La Crosse County that's shown on this map?
I am.
And is the approximate location of where the gun was found pinpointed on this map?
It is.
Can you please indicate with the laser pointer where that is? So that is near the address of N7305 County Road M?
It is.
What did you do when you got there, Deputy?
Like I said, I had the complainant, I brought him over, or he showed me where the firearm was located. Once we got there, he covered it up with a little bit of grass just for safety precautions, just to make sure no one else found the firearm. So he showed me exactly where it was at, or just started on the south side of the road, just a little bit south of that fire number.
And how did the grass get uncovered then?
It didn't have much on it, I mean, it was April, the grass isn't very long at that time, but
Did you then handle the firearm?
I did.
Did you put gloves on before you did that?
I did.
What was the first thing you did when you handled the firearm?
Prior to that, I started taking pictures, and then once I handled the firearm, I made sure it was, you want to make sure the firearm is safe. It was not locked in the back position, indicating that it's not safe at that point. It appeared there was still a magazine in the gun, and so just at that point it wasn't safe. I attempted to make it safe, however, just due to it being out in the elements, it was rusted over.
What kind of gun was it?
It was a Glock 40 caliber 22C.
Are you familiar with that type of gun?
I am.
Why are you familiar with that type of gun?
I carry a Glock.
That's your duty weapon?
Yeah, not a 40 caliber, but I carry a Glock.
What else did you notice about the gun, if anything?
Once I observed the firearm, I observed that, just like I said, I am familiar with Glock. I know where the serial numbers generally are. I noticed that it appeared that the one on the slide appeared to be filed off, and then there's another one on the frame itself that looked like it had been removed.
Did you notice anything else about the firearm?
There was a black, like a elastic cloth or something on the handle.
And you stated that you had taken photos, correct?
I did.
What did you do next?
Once I took photos, then it was placed in my patrol vehicle.
You talked about trying to make the weapon safe, correct? Is that a yes?
Yes.
Sorry. What did you do? Can you lead me through the steps of what that looked like that day?
I removed the magazine from the firearm. I observed that there was at least 2 rounds inside the magazine. It's on a Glock. There's an indicator that it possibly has another round in the chamber if the extractor is pointed out just a little bit. Again, the firearm was rusted over in that spot, but it appeared it was punched out a little bit, so indicating that there was possibly one in the chamber. I tried to rack the slide back, but due to it being rusted over, I could not do so.
So I think you had said you tried to make it safe, correct?
Correct.
But because of the condition of the gun, that wasn't possible.
Yeah.
What did you then do to get that firearm transported back to, or packaged in your vehicle?
I secured it in my patrol vehicle to be transported back to the sheriff's office to place into evidence.
Where did you put it in your patrol vehicle?
I believe in the passenger front seat on the floorboard.
You're taking photos, correct?
I did.
Did you review those photos before you left the scene that day?
Yeah, we use a program called iCrime Fighter. Due to the location that we were at, we don't get very good cellular service. When I was having a difficult time logging into our program. I had to turn my phone on and off, and then once I got it on, it indicated that it was taking photos, but for some reason it didn't save at that point. So then once I realized that, then I set the firearm back down where you could see that where it was currently sitting, or previously sitting, sorry. And I took another photo of that.
How could you tell where the firearm had been previously sitting?
It was, you could see in the grass where it was generally at. It appeared it had been there some time.
Were you wearing a body-worn camera at the time you were on this call?
I was.
And did you review that body-worn camera?
I did, just to confirm the placement and which way the barrel and everything was facing.
Did you take more pictures then?
We took photographs once we got back to the sheriff's office. Deputy Peter Sloan did that.
That was a bad question, I'm sorry. You took photos of the firearm in the location, you put it back in to document that since you lost the other photos, correct?
I did.
Eventually you took Mr. Barna home?
I did.
And then you went back to the sheriff's department?
Yes.
And I believe you already testified it was processed, the firearm was processed then for evidence?
Yeah, due to the fire, I didn't put it into evidence myself due to it not being safe at that point and believe that there was still one in the chamber. So Deputy Peter Sloan took over at that point.
I'm going to hand you a stack of photos here. And Your Honor, we already moved number 14 into evidence and it was published. Attorney Nelson has indicated he has no objection to these also being moved into evidence and published. It's Exhibit 13, 15, 16, 17, and 18.
Okay. Given no objection will be received, you can publish them.
And Deputy, I'm going to put these in front of you. They're going to be on the screen behind you as well. Can I get 14 back? We'll start with 13, if we can get that put on the screen, please.
And Deputy, can you tell me what we're looking at in Exhibit 13?
So approximately just to the north of that's where I parked my patrol vehicle, and what you're looking at is the guardrail. Just off to the left of that would be where the firearm was recovered.
Okay. And then if we can go to 14, please. Deputy, can you tell me what we're looking at in Exhibit 14?
In there, you're looking northbound, and you can see the firearm on the ground.
And that's your patrol vehicle in the picture?
Yes,
And you had been traveling northbound from Mr. Barna's residence?
yes,
And the firearm was on the passenger side of your car, correct?
it is.
We can go to Exhibit 15, please. Deputy, can you tell me what we're looking at in Exhibit 15?
That's the Glock that was recovered, Glock 40 caliber 22C.
And this is a retake, right?
Yes,
But it's in the same location as the firearm was in when you initially found it.
yes.
Can we proceed to 16, please? Deputy, can you tell me what we're looking at here?
This would have been a photograph once we got back to the Crosse County Sheriff's Office. I believe this was taken by Deputy Peter Sloan.
And is it a true and accurate representation of the firearm you found?
It is.
What is the item to the left of the firearm?
It's the magazine.
Can we proceed to 17, please? What are we looking at here, Deputy?
It's just a close-up of the firearm.
And what part of the firearm is this?
It's showing the slide, and below that's the partial of the frame.
Okay. And does the slide have any details about the gun on it?
Yeah, it shows that it's a Glock 40 caliber 22C.
And can you point out for me, Deputy, using the laser pointer, where you're getting that information from the slide?
Right here.
And then if we can move ahead to Exhibit 18, please. Can you tell me what we're looking at here?
Again, that's just another picture of the firearm. Yeah,
And it was, is that still the slide at the top part there?
yes.
Okay. And what do you observe about it?
So where the rusty spot is, that's generally where there would have been a serial number located. It appeared that it had been filed off, and then if you look on the, right below the slide, on the frame itself, you could see in the plastic, it looked like it had been tampered with.
And Deputy, you were working for the La Crosse County Sheriff's Office when the homicides of Nemo Yang, Peng Lor, and Trevor Maloney occurred, correct?
I was, just not that day.
So you did have knowledge that there had been some gun violence on County Road M?
I did.
Thank you. I have nothing further.
Thank you.
Cross?
No, thank you.
All right, thank you. You may step down. Call your next witness.
Yes, thank you. At this time, the state calls Jessica Crawford. Forward, ma'am. Have you stand before the clerk, standing up, and be sworn.
Do you solemnly swear the testimony you give in this matter shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
You can have a seat at the witness stand.
Ma'am, I'll have you please state and spell your name for the record.
My name is Jessica Crawford, JESSICACRAWFORD.
What do you do for a living?
I am a firearms and tool mark examiner with the Wisconsin State Crime Lab, Milwaukee Laboratory.
Can you tell us what you do in that job?
The main duties of the job is to examine firearms and firearm-related evidence like fired cartridge cases and fired projectiles or fired bullets, to determine if the fired evidence was fired either in the same firearm or in a specific or suspected firearm.
How long have you been doing that job?
About 7.5 years.
And to be clear, how long have you been employed with the Wisconsin State Crime Lab?
About 9.5 years.
What did you do before you were doing this job as a firearms and tool mark examiner?
I held a title called a forensic program technician. In that capacity, I worked with DNA databank samples, and I worked as an evidence specialist.
Put two documents in front of you. We'll talk about each in turn. So, ma'am, let's start first with what's been previously marked as Exhibit 19. See that?
Yes,
What is that?
this is my statement of qualifications.
What's a statement of qualifications?
A statement of qualifications is a working resume.
Does that document summarize education and training that lets you do your job with the Wisconsin State Crime Lab?
Yes, it does.
I'd move Exhibit 19.
You received?
Can you summarize for us or explain to us what within the statement of qualifications, what kind of specialized education and training do you have that lets you do your job as a firearms and tool mark examiner?
I have a Bachelor's of Science from Fort Hays State University, and I've completed the Wisconsin State Crime Lab Firearm and Tool Mark Examiner Training Program.
What all does that entail?
That program is roughly 18 to 24 months. It is done in a modular style, so each subdiscipline you go through a training program for that subdiscipline. At the end of that, you are competency tested and allowed to perform those particular duties. And this is all done under the apprenticeship of a senior examiner.
Okay, you explained sort of firearms identification a little bit earlier, I think, in talking about your job. Can you tell us, well, what's firearms identification?
So firearms identification is taking fired evidence and evaluating it for different types of characteristics. So there are class characteristics and there are individual characteristics. Class characteristics are characteristics that are determined in the manufacturing stage. So something like the caliber would be a class characteristic, or the shape of the firing pin would be a class characteristic. That would be similar in a group of guns. So for instance, a Smith & Wesson might have a hemispherical firing pin. That would be a class characteristic. Once we evaluate for class characteristics, we then evaluate for what's called individual characteristics. Individual are microscopic striations and impressions that are left over on the fired evidence from the firing process. We use what's called a comparison microscope, which is two microscopes that are connected by one optical bridge. This allows us to look at two objects simultaneously. If we have a firearm, we perform test fires of that firearm and recover those known samples and use those samples to compare to the evidence that we received in the case.
Thank you. Is this a new kind of study, a new thing that people can do with guns?
No.
No? Tell me about that.
Firearms examination has been practiced for around 100 years.
Is the Wisconsin State Crime Lab accredited?
Yes.
Who is the accrediting body?
It's called ANAB, A-N-A-B.
What does that stand for, if you know?
I cannot think of it at this moment.
Fair enough. You know that the State Crime Lab is accredited, though?
Yes.
Okay. And that's the body?
Yes.
Okay. What quality control procedures are used at the lab in your discipline?
Every case that the firearms unit examines will go through a peer review and verification process. During peer review, a second qualified examiner will take the paperwork and ensure that it's accurate and complete. And during the verification, a second qualified examiner takes the physical evidence, performs an examination of that evidence, and confirms that the evidence supports the conclusions made by the original examiner.
Have you testified before in firearms identification?
Yes, I have.
How many times?
Over 90 times.
Have you been found to be an expert in this area before
Yes.
and offered your opinion or been allowed to offer your opinion in court?
Yes.
Okay. Can you walk us through what's the process that you go through when you receive evidence, firearm evidence, in a case in your job?
Is there specific evidence you want me to talk about?
Sure. That's a great question for me to be more specific. When you're doing your job and you are sometimes provided with a firearm, yes?
Yes, I am.
And are you also sometimes provided fired cartridge cases?
Yes.
Also sometimes projectiles?
Yes.
Walk me through the process of what you do when you're handed all of those in your job as a firearms examiner.
So we will take a firearm and we perform a notes sheet to document everything about the firearm. The make, the manufacturer, the serial number, characteristics that we see that will be useful in the examination process. We also look at this firearm to ensure that it's not damaged, it's not manipulated, and that there isn't any concern for safety. We check the safety devices and make sure that they're working properly, and then we perform 2 test fires of that firearm. We have a shooting range, and I myself take the firearm in the back, perform the test fires, and collect those known test fires. When we have fired evidence, like fired cartridge cases or fired bullets, what we'll do is we will document them in a similar fashion with a note sheet that allows us to document all of the different characteristics, manufacturing information, caliber information, etc. And we will then do an evaluation to determine if we have similar class characteristics among those pieces of evidence, the fired cartridge cases. Once we determine that we do have that, then we will perform the microscopic examination and evaluate for the individual characteristics. If we are able to see that there is agreement between them and that we do have the proper agreement that we need to make our identification or elimination, then we will render an opinion and we will create a report, and then it will go through peer review and verification.
Did you become involved in crime lab case number M21-1670?
Yes, I did.
Is that a case involving a Pang Lor, a Trevor Maloney, and a Nemo Yang?
I believe so, but I'm not certain of the names.
Sure. Here's what I'll have you do. I placed in front of you previously a document that's been previously marked as exhibit number 20. Do you see that document in front of you?
Yes, I do.
What is that?
This is a report for laboratory number M21-1670 that I generated on June 6th of 2023.
Okay. And those names that I just stated, is that included in that document as the case name?
Yes, it is.
Okay. This is your report that you authored based on your work in this case.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I'd move exhibit 20.
You received?
Okay. You became involved in this case. What all were you provided with?
I was provided with a firearm in this case. I was provided with 10 fired cartridge cases and I believe 11 or 12 projectiles, and then there were some not suitable projectiles also.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and request permission to publish exhibit 20.
Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you. That up, that way we can all know what you're talking about. Okay. This is your report that we're looking at, yes?
Yes.
Okay. Let's go ahead and start with this. You said that you were provided with a firearm?
That's correct.
That's item R1.
That is correct.
Okay. Tell me about that firearm. What did you identify it as?
This firearm is a Glock 22C. That is a .40 caliber semi-automatic pistol.
Not everybody is a firearm expert like you. Tell me about a semi-automatic pistol. What does that mean?
A semi-automatic pistol means that when this pistol is ready to fire and the trigger is pulled, the firing pin will strike the primer. It will send the bullet down the barrel. During the process of that explosion and power, the slide will reset, the cartridge case will be ejected, and the slide, as it is setting back into place, into a closed position, will reset a new cartridge into the chamber of the gun, and it will be ready to fire again with another pull of the trigger.
Okay. When you were, and this may move forward to page 2 of this document, it's a 3-page document, did you visually examine that Glock 40 caliber?
Yes, I did.
Can you describe to us your visual examination?
During the initial assessment of this firearm, I found that it was inoperable as it was received. Due to corrosion and rust, I was unable to function this firearm just as it was received to me. During my examination, I cleaned the firearm and I added gun oil to the firearm to function the slide. So I was able to then function the firearm at least enough to see that it could function. And during that testing, I found that the guide rod and guide spring, which are 2 pieces in the slide that provide tension and movement for the slide, were broken or corroded. And I then used one of our reference firearms to replace that guide pin and guide rod, and guide spring, so that I could successfully test fire this firearm.
Okay. So it wasn't working and you had to replace some parts?
Yes.
Okay. Replacing those parts, What, if any, effect does that have on class characteristics of this gun?
Those particular pieces have no bearing on the microscopic markings that we would be looking at for projectiles or cartridge cases.
Okay, so you're getting actually, I think, a little bit to my next question, which is what, if anything, does replacing those specific parts have to do with individual characteristics for this gun?
So because these two pieces do not come in contact with any cartridge case or bullet that is inserted into that firearm, they would leave no markings on those pieces, and we would not have to evaluate for that concern.
Okay. The inoperable pieces don't touch cartridges.
That's correct.
Okay. So you cleaned it, you made it operable, and then from there, well, let me ask you this. Were there any other defects to the firearm that you noticed?
Yes.
What were those?
So on a typical Glock, you will see 3 locations where the serial number is. On the barrel or chamber part of the barrel, on the slide, and then there's a metal insert on the frame in front of the trigger. The slide and the barrel had the serial number scratched off of them, and the metal insert on the frame was removed, or it was gone, missing.
You have no idea how those two things happened,
That's correct.
and that wouldn't be part of your job.
No.
Okay. Did you take any steps to remedy those defects?
Yes.
What did you do?
On the slide and the barrel, because the serial number was still existent, I used a series of physical and chemical restoration techniques, and I was able to restore the serial number on both pieces, the slide and the barrel.
Okay. Before you test fired this Glock, did you do anything else with it?
Not that I can recall.
Okay. So in addition to the firearm itself, you were provided other evidentiary items, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Let's go back to page 1 if we can. And without reading every single word, can you just kind of run us through what you were provided?
Yes. So I received 10 fired .40 caliber cartridge cases. I received quite a few different projectiles and bullets. So there are a few different ways that we describe them. If the bullet is fully intact and we can determine what type of bullet, and by type I mean, is it a full metal jacket, is it jacketed hollow point, I will list it as what I can identify it as. If it is just the jacketing, which is that copper coating on the outer portion of the bullet, I will call it just the jacketing. If there is jacketing and bullet or lead material together, we'll call that a jacketed bullet if we can't identify the entire thing. So in this case, I received jacketed bullet fragments, jacketed hollow point bullets, lead fragments, and I believe there was bullet jacket fragments.
Okay. Were all of these items that you were provided, in terms of the fired cartridge cases, the fired jacketed bullets, and the various fragments, consistent with each other? In terms of make, let me specify in terms of make.
In terms of class characteristics,
Yes.
yes, so between the 10 fired cartridge cases, they shared similar class characteristics, and between the 11 12. "11 projectiles that were able to be evaluated. They shared class characteristics as well.
Okay, tell me about the class characteristics.
On the fired cartridge cases, they had an elliptical firing pin shape and a rectangular aperture shape. And on the projectiles, they all had what's called polygonal rifling.
Explain to me polygonal rifling, or actually, can you just explain to me rifling?
Rifling is on the interior of the barrel. Rifling is raised and recessed portions called lands and grooves, and they are on the inside of the barrel, often in a spiral, and they go in a direction to the left or to the right. They will have a count, something like 5 or 6, meaning that there are 5 lands and 5 grooves, or 6 lands and 6 grooves. The design of rifling is to help the barrel or the bullet go down the barrel fast and accurate. So, different manufacturers have different types of rifling. The most common one we see is called conventional, and conventional will have very harsh corners. So each landing groove will have a harsh corner that looks like a 90-degree angle. In polygonal rifling, it will be more like hills and valleys. So you'll see more of a swoop than an actual hard edge to those. And that's how we can determine when we have different rifling characteristics.
Okay, are these class characteristics or are these individual characteristics?
These are class characteristics.
Okay. What would be individual characteristics?
Individual characteristics would be when we use that comparison microscope to look into each land and groove to see the striations and impressions that were in the interior of that barrel as that bullet traveled through and it was hugged by that barrel impressed those markings onto that bullet. When we're looking at individual, we're looking in those lands and grooves, so not just at them as, you know, to count them or to see the type, but the actual individual striations in them.
Thank you. I forgot to ask previously, and I'll do that now. Were you also provided with a magazine?
Yes,
Did that magazine contain bullets?
it did contain unfired, yes.
Unfired. How many?
There were 2 magazines in this case. So one of the magazines had 3 unfired .40 caliber cartridge cases, and the second magazine had 7 unfired .40 caliber cartridge cases.
Okay. And
Cartridges, excuse me.
what brand magazines were those?
They were both Glock brand.
Okay. Now at this point, we've gone through visual examination of the firearm. We've talked about other items you were provided with. You did the microscopic evaluation with the test fires and the comparison with these items, right?
That's correct.
Okay. I want to talk about the results of all of that. Why don't you walk me through the evidentiary items? Were all of them suitable for comparison?
No.
Were some of them suitable for comparison?
Yes.
Okay. And let's go ahead, if we can look at page 3 of 3 of this document. We have that up. You have the document also in front of you. Which items were not suitable? Well, actually, page 2 might be better for this. Let's look at page 2 for this. What items were not suitable?
So the items that were not suitable for examination are items W, Y was suitable but was submitted with a jacketed bullet fragment that was not suitable. Z is suitable, but it was submitted with 4 jacketed bullet fragments and 8 lead fragments that were not suitable. And AA was suitable, but it was submitted with 1 jacketed bullet fragment and 2 lead fragments that were not suitable.
Okay, all of the unsuitable were bullets and bullet fragments, is that right?
Yes, they were bullet fragments and lead fragments.
Sorry, right, what you said, thank you. Why weren't they suitable?
A good portion of them were incredibly small. So some of those jacketing pieces, those jacketed bullet fragments, were just much too small or contained no microscopic information. So they didn't come in contact with the rifling. And then the lead fragments, they're on the interior, kind of protected by that jacketing, and so they don't come in contact with the rifling, and so they bear no microscopic evaluation for them.
What might cause a bullet to fragment?
I would expect that that would happen as it impacted something.
Impacted if it hit something?
Correct.
Okay. So then moving along, those were our unsuitable for identification or comparison. There were then a number of items that were suitable for comparison.
Yes.
Okay, now we can look at page 3. Let's first talk about inconclusive. Out of the items that were suitable for comparison, did any of them result in an inconclusive result?
Yes.
Why don't you tell us about that?
So an inconclusive result means that I was able to see that there were class characteristics represented. However, because of impact, penetration damage, and shallow rifling, I was unable to utilize the individual characteristics to make an identification or an elimination. So an inconclusive result just means that it has not been identified, it has not been eliminated, but that it shares class characteristics.
Okay, what items were those?
Those are items U, Z, AB1, and AD2.
And what were all of those? If you need to look at pages 1 and 2, please do so.
So item U is a fired jacketed bullet fragment. Item Z is a fired jacketed bullet. Items AB1 is a fired jacketed bullet fragment, and AD2 is a fired jacketed bullet fragment.
Okay, and those 4 items, inconclusive, it's possible, is it possible that they went through the Glock 40 caliber 22C?
It is possible, yes.
Is it also possible that they didn't?
It is possible they did not.
Okay, thank you. So then let's get to the last grouping of items. Were some of the items you were provided with, were you able to make an identification from microscopic comparison?
Yes, I was.
Okay, what items were those?
So I received 10 fired 40 caliber cartridge cases. I was able to determine that they were fired in item R1, the Glock semi-automatic pistol. I received 7 fired projectiles, items V, X, Y, AA, AB2, AC, and AD1, and I was able to determine that they were fired through the barrel of item R1, the Glock semi-automatic pistol.
Okay, and Judge, I believe Exhibit 110, the bag of, back there?
It's right here.
Fantastic. Ms. Crawford, I'm placing in front of you, there are my words, what's been previously received into evidence as Exhibit 110. you go ahead, look in that bag, and tell me, take a look through those plastic envelopes. Are those the 10 fired cartridge cases?
Yes, ma'am, they are.
Thank you.
Turn the lights up a little bit.
Placing before you an item that has a sticker, Exhibit 21. I'm also providing you a box of gloves.
Okay.
And I'm going to ask you to open that up. I'm not going to bury the lead. I'm going to ask you if that's item R1, the 40 caliber Glock 22C.
Yes, it is.
If you could please take that out. Well, I guess first I'd move for the admission of, I believe that's Exhibit 21.
Yes.
To receive.
And then, Your Honor, I'd request permission to publish it to the jury.
Any objection?
No.
Go ahead.
If you could please take that out and show us the firearm. Thank you, ma'am. That's all for me, Judge. I have nothing further.
Crosse?
Yes, please. You need a trash can.
Yes.
Is there a trash can so she can put her gloves away?
Yeah, right here. There you go.
Thank you, sir.
Bro.
Afternoon.
Good afternoon.
You work at the crime lab.
I do, yes.
I'm just going to ask you some general questions about the crime lab, okay?
Okay,
There's lots of departments in the crime lab, right?
that is correct.
You're one of those departments, correct?
That's correct.
We heard before, I think yesterday, we all heard from Nick Stolke. You know who he is, right?
I do, yes.
Works in a different department in the crime lab, correct?
He does, yes.
And I think it's like crime scene investigations, correct?
Yes.
And then there's a department that covers DNA.
Yes, there is.
There's a department that covers fingerprints.
Yes.
There's probably, there's a department that, there's lots of other departments, maybe they're not, they test drugs,
Yes.
they test bodily fluids.
Yes.
Okay. I want to ask you in general about testing of guns, okay?
Okay,
Because that's your expertise, right?
that is.
There's certainly other people at the crime lab and other departments who also do tests to guns, correct?
Yes.
But you in particular, you are an expert regarding the firearm, put it FTA, FTE. Tool examiner, that's what I put the acronym for. Firearm tool examiner, right?
Yes.
All right. And part of, again, in general, what you're doing and maybe some other people in other departments are doing is at the crime lab, you examine a gun to determine, and you use science in examination of that gun to see if that gun can be connected to a specific case. Is that a fair summary?
Yes, I think so, yes.
Yeah, there's different ways that you could connect a gun to a case, right?
This is correct, yes.
And you're one of those ways, correct?
That's correct.
Sure. Right? There's other departments that might have other tools in a generic sense on how you could connect a gun to a case, right?
Yes.
But all of those, certainly for you, you use science, right?
Yes.
You're a scientist, essentially.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, you use the scientific method.
I do.
And part of the scientific method is there's a hypotheses, right?
That's correct.
What's a hypothesis?
A hypothesis is an educated guess.
Okay. And you make some educated guesses in part of the scientific method, correct?
That's correct.
And then you test those hypotheses, right?
That's correct.
And then there's kind of, again, broad categories there, but it might be 3 different things you can do after a test. You can rule something out, you can rule something in, or it's kind of that middle land of inconclusive, right?
That's correct.
Those are essentially the 3 different categories in general when you use the scientific method at the crime lab, what you can come up with, right?
That's correct.
All right. And so what the firearm tool examiner does, what you do is you connect a gun generally to, I'll just call it bullets, and that's a very big umbrella to cover anything coming out of the gun. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Can we use that non-scientific, non-technical term of bullet to just cover anything coming out, discharged from the gun?
Yes, sure.
Okay, and so you're with me, right? That's what you can do as a firearms examiner. You can connect a gun to a bullet, correct?
That is correct.
All right. There's other, you said a fingerprint department, correct?
That is correct.
They might be able to connect a gun to a person, right?
That is correct.
And then there's a DNA department as well, correct?
That's correct.
They might be able to connect a gun to a person, correct?
That is correct.
So those departments might be able to get more specific and the connection to the case, right?
Yes, sir.
And in this case, for you, before the gun got to you in your department, other departments examined it, correct?
Yes, I believe so.
Because certainly as you said, you took cleaning solvent to it, you did other things to the gun, right?
Yes, I did.
You wouldn't want to do that before the fingerprint people get it, right?
Absolutely not.
You wouldn't want to do that before the DNA people get it, correct?
That is correct.
So the proper procedure is to let those people do their job, to use science to see if they can rule something in, correct?
That's correct.
And it went through those channels and then it eventually got to you, correct?
That is correct.
And then you used, I won't get into it you used scientific method to rule some things in, correct?
That's correct.
And even with all of that science, with all of that testing, you couldn't rule everything in, right?
That is correct.
Sometimes you came to the conclusion that it's inconclusive, right?
Yes.
I would imagine that's an unsatisfactory finding sometimes.
I don't have an opinion that way.
Yeah, fair. You're not you're a scientist, I'm testing it, there's no value judgment on what the result is.
Absolutely.
Okay, perfect. But essentially, with the one thing, in broadest terms here, what you're telling the jury is you used the scientific method and you were able to connect this gun to the bullets, right?
Yes, I was.
Correct. So when we had exhibit number 21, which is gun, and exhibit 110, which is the bullets, you're like, I can connect these 2 things, correct?
That is correct, sir.
You're not here to connect that gun to a person, right?
No,
You can't do that, right?
I cannot.
We'd need to hear from somebody else from the crime lab about how it could be connected to a particular person, right?
That is correct.
And that's not you.
That is not me.
That's all.
Any redirect?
Nope, nothing for me.
All right, you may step down.
Thank you.
Why don't we
Want some of this? This one's mine.
Move this over first. Is there another, now, we only have 20 minutes, but do you have anybody else that's short?
We don't actually. I wish we did, we don't.
Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, because I always want to get you out by 4, so I always put the pressure on to say, hey, let's be done by 4. I don't want to start somebody new, obviously, and I don't think we have anybody new today. So, same thing, be here about 8:15 or so, and we'll start up at 8:30. Hopefully, we'll start right at 8:30. I hope everything's working out with, let's get home. If there are any issues, let us, of course, call us and let us know what's going on. If you need, just one thing, if you need anything like food or anything that makes life easier in this process, feel free to bring it. The only thing is don't bring your cell phones in, of course. But otherwise, don't talk about the case.